Welcome to Financial Clarity, the podcast dedicated to helping service-based small business owners achieve financial success. Join us as we demystify financial concepts, get practical tips from seasoned entrepreneurs, and discover strategies to increase profit and value. Hannah Smolinski here. I'm the host of the Financial Clarity podcast, where I connect successful entrepreneurs, financial experts, and leaders in the small business community. Some of our past guests include Nikki Rausch, who teaches entrepreneurs how to sell their services in an authentic and relationship-based way, and Max McGolan, who works in business banking, and she shares insights on how to prepare to get a loan or a line of credit or anything that you need from the bank. So if any of that piques your interest, make sure to check out those past episodes. Today's episode is brought to you by my company, Clara CFO Group. Clara CFO is dedicated to providing financial clarity and profit-maximizing solutions to small businesses. The team at Clara CFO are seasoned accounting professionals with a heart for small business. We help growth-minded entrepreneurs thrive through fractional CFO services and financial education. To learn more about Clara CFO Group and how we can help your business, visit claracfo.com. So let's get into our guest today, Julie Fry. Hi, how are you?
Hi. It's good to be here, Hannah.
Yeah, great to see you. I'm going to introduce Julie to everybody. So Julie is the founder of Your Expert Guest, a podcast guest booking agency for service providers and impact-driven leaders that want to speak directly to their ideal client without spending hours and hours on social media. That sounds good. She and her team have booked over 1,500 interviews for their clients and can track hundreds of thousands of dollars of business back to being a podcast guest on top-ranked shows. When she's not working with her amazing team of guests and host matchmakers, she loves spending time with her family, kayaking, laughing hysterically at SNL sketches, and of course, listening to podcasts. Julie, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I have to ask, what are your favorite SNL sketches?
Oh, that's such a tough one.
I know.
Anything with Kate McKinnon. She was the GOAT. It was very sad to see her go. Tina Fey and Amy Poehler, that era, loved everything that they did.
Such a good era.
But probably my all-time favorite is the sketch. Do you watch SNL?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So the sketches where Kate McKinnon played that character that I'm blanking on her name, but it would always be like an alien abduction. And there would be the two people that had this amazing like religious experience. And then Kate McKinnon is sitting there with her legs spread and smoking a cigarette. And she had like the most foul, disgusting experience. So that's probably my favorite.
That was classic. I missed that era when I first, I wasn't watching it live, like during that era. And then I found out about that series of sketches later. And I was like, this is too good.
It's so good.
And now she's in the Barbie movie. She's like, moved on to her big time stuff, which is awesome.
Yeah. So we are very sad about the writer's strike. My daughter turned 16 in January, and we had always said, like, when you turn 16, we're going to go to New York City and go watch SNL live. So fingers crossed that it ends and we can make that happen this year.
That's amazing. I went to New York City when I was turning 16, did a little pilgrimage over there. That's great.
Yeah.
Love it.
It's a good time. You're old enough to appreciate everything it has to offer.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. Well, we could talk about SNL all day. I love that.
That's not why people are here.
Yeah, probably not. But I would love to hear a little bit more about your business journey. So you've started this podcast guesting business, but tell us how you got there, because we met when you actually had a different business, and that was probably in 2017 or 2018. But I'd love to hear a little bit about your journey and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah. So you are correct. We met, I think it was 2017, and I had a company at that time called Business Among Moms. It's a networking organization for women balancing motherhood and entrepreneurship. So I had started that in 2013 when my kids were 3 and 5, and just looking for a way to bring my passion for small businesses. I worked all of my career experience was working in a sales capacity for small businesses. I had one job working for a large insurance company when I was in college, and I almost got fired. I just was not a fit for the corporate game. So small businesses are where my heart is. And because there are so many women that are looking for a way to kind of bring their professional skills out through small business ownership. Maybe they're like you have this great CPA experience and looking for more flexibility as a mom. So just we enjoyed creating spaces for women to network, share ideas, learn how to run a successful business. So I had that company for 7 years. I sold it in January of 2020, which was
Wow.
such kismet. I know. Obviously, I did not know what was coming. As my kids got older, I was ready for something different. And one of the things I loved about that company is it allowed me to use my skill of matchmaking. I love connecting people. It's something that I just do automatically. It brings me a lot of joy. I never really expected anything in return for it, but it was wonderful to have that be kind of a core tenet of my business, that I got to do that all the time. And so when I was thinking about what I wanted to do next after I sold this business, I thought it would be really nice to incorporate something where I could connect people. So fast forward a few months and, COVID is happening, live events are getting canceled. I have a lot of friends who own small businesses, and many of them would speak for lead generation and to maintain their visibility. So one morning I was walking my dog and listening to a podcast, and I had this like literal light bulb go off above my head where I thought, gosh, I'm worried about my friends that are small business owners and have events that they're speaking at canceling. What if they went on podcasts as guests to maintain their visibility? And so from there, I started doing a lot of research, like, do businesses like this that I'm thinking of exist? And there were. And then the next step was to really test this idea. Like, would I be able to get people on podcasts, and would I enjoy the work? And so I guinea pigged a friend of ours that we both know to see how it would go. And yes, I was able to check those boxes. I got her onto podcasts and I enjoyed doing the work. And so I launched this business officially in May of 2020.
Oh, so it was really quick after.
It was really quick.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay,
Like
okay.
I feel like it was end of February, early March when I was like, okay, is this something that I want to do? And then I'm a quick start, Colby quick start. So I like immediately came home and started doing research. And I think by the end of the week had built a rudimentary website.
That's amazing. Have you ever heard of the concept called prototyping?
No, I haven't.
It's a book. Yeah, it's this yellow book behind me. It's kind of
Okay.
glowing,
Okay. I
but it's
see
called
it.
The Right It. And it's kind of it talks about when you have an idea. So many ideas never go anywhere. But
Right.
then there are sometimes when you have an idea, but you're like, I don't want to fully invest into building a full prototype. That might take months and months and months to do. But like a prototype is kind of before you even do a prototype. And so it's almost like kind of in some ways you kind of did that and testing your idea of like, well, let's just see if like practically we can do this. I mean, services, it's a little different than maybe a product or something.
Yeah.
But that's amazing. You liked it enough that you said, hey, maybe this is the next thing.
Yeah. And the other, like selfishly, it was the pandemic. What else was I going to do?
Right.
So it was the perfect time to start this type of business. It's interesting that you bring up that pre-dough type. I worked in for product businesses in my corporate days. And so prototyping was a big part of it. And yes, you absolutely can spend a ton of time, staff time, money in developing something that doesn't really go anywhere. And so we learned that before going down that road, I didn't know that there was a term for it, the prototype, but you'd come up with a concept, you'd show it, maybe even just sketches, or we 3D printed things and showed them to customers. Say, hey, is this something that you'd be interested in? And could we get a commitment on a test so that we weren't taking a loss on all of these new ideas?
Yeah, that's amazing. So you did your research when you were, trying to decide your next thing. You're trying to feel like, is this something that people actually pay for?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
is that so with the podcast, do you yourself, it sounds like you yourself are really into podcasts.
I am. I
And
am.
so, what do you think it is about guesting that would make a business owner maybe say, hey, yeah, I want to hire somebody to do this for me and get on podcasts? Like, why would they want to get on podcasts?
Yeah. And a lot of people at this stage, I think, don't really know about the power of podcasts.
Mm,
There's kind of the camps of people that listen to podcasts and they understand how passionate you can get about a podcast. I know you and I both know Natalie Ekdahl, and she has the Biz Chicks podcast that she's had since 2014. Amazing that, she's still releasing episodes every week.
right.
She has an incredibly loyal following of people that listen to that podcast every week. In fact, research shows that 80% of listeners will listen to an entire podcast episode. So
Wow.
you compare that to somebody who picks up their phone and they have a brand or, an entrepreneur that they follow, and you maybe get 6 seconds of them stopping and watching your reel, and then they move on to the next thing. And
Mm,
because our attention spans are so decreased, who knows what they remember about what they saw, versus a podcast interview where, as a guest, you get to share so much about what matters to you as a business owner. So, whether it's your framework of how you do work for your clients, maybe it's your company culture of you only hire moms to do your work. And so that allows listeners who maybe that really resonates for them, that they're leaning in, they're listening. They might go look you up online afterwards. Maybe it's your company's mission, vision, and values that are really important to you. You get a chance, because you're talking for 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour, to the host about what matters to you, and also helping their listeners with whatever your expertise is. So it is the most amazingly valuable time where you're getting to be in front of an engaged audience, that the host's connection with their listeners transfers to you and builds that know, like, trust factor.
mm,
It is just hands down the best marketing out there. And so that would be number one, why you'd want to consider it as a service business owner. Um, the second thing that I love about it for business providers is that many of us, our business included, relies on referrals for new business.
mm.
So it's a wonderful supplement to that, because referrals come from when people really understand your business. So maybe it's past clients who have worked with you. Maybe it's business owners in complementary industries will refer business to you. And when you're having an interview with a podcast host, you get to know them. Like, as a good guest, you'll research them beforehand. You'll listen to some of their podcast episodes. You'll go to their website. You'll understand what it is that they do and who they do it for. When you have the time being interviewed for their show, it's a two-way street. I'm learning a
Yeah.
little bit more about Hannah. I didn't know you liked SNL, but you get to know people on a deeper level.
Hmm.
And after the interview, so after Hannah stops recording, we'll have a little bit more time to chat. I can ask her, like, hey, what are you really excited about in your business? What do you need support with? And we get to help each other. That's
Yeah.
how we build our networks. And that goes on forever. So I love it from that standpoint of it really helps support those business owners that are referral based, because it just provides you sort of a more powerful referral network.
Mm. Yes, I think that's really true. And I mean, I've done guesting and I actually said I would never have my own podcast. I just want to guest because that's way more fun. You don't have to do any of the work. You just show up and, well, you do your research a little bit, but you're not, it seems like you don't have to plan quite as much for it. But here I am. But I think the guesting part of it was always enjoyable for that reason, to be able to make those additional connections. And
Mhm.
then, if their next guest comes on and says something about how much they need to hire a CFO, and I just happen to be, the CFO that they have had recently on their channel, like it's a, pretty easy introduction there. So I can see how
Yeah.
that would work a lot on these service businesses.
Yeah. The other piece that is worth considering is one of the strategies that we use for our clients when we're booking them on shows is thinking about, is the host an ideal client for that company's business? Because when you're having that conversation, sometimes what hosts will start doing is they'll ask you questions and you can tell like they're asking because these are pain points for them specifically.
Absolutely.
So a very savvy podcast guest will kind of like tap into their inner business development person and like start asking questions. And then at the end, say, hey, I noticed that you were asking a lot of questions about, XYZ. This is something that I help clients with all the time. Would you like to set up a call to talk about that? And then you're going down that road of potentially hiring a new client.
Yeah. I mean, that's great because you might, and I think the other thing about the being a guest is also with the podcast platform, they sit out there for so long. It's and they're searchable. They're really great for SEO. Like if you're to Google my name right now, most of the first of the things that pop up are going to be podcast episodes, which is kind of interesting because I have a fairly big footprint on the internet at this point with, YouTube and whatnot. But that is really interesting. And sometimes people will come that have listened to something that's years old, which is another kind of fascinating thing. Like not a lot of marketing these days. You're not going to have an Instagram post necessarily come up, that's a couple years old.
Yeah, there's really nothing else like it. And I'm glad that you brought that up because it is evergreen. And even if the show that you were on stops releasing new episodes, your interviews were still searchable and discoverable, and people will still find them. So yeah, very cool.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, because there's certain long form opportunities. So podcasts are long form interview style. Typically, if we're talking about guesting, it's an interview style. But so you said that 80% watch the full thing or listen to the full thing. Just to give people a comparison, if I had 80% of people watching my full YouTube video, it would be like the best results in the world. Like nobody watches, YouTube videos to the full extent. I mean, some people watch the full thing, but like maybe 25% of people, if you're lucky, make it to the end. So I that's a really interesting, just kind of tidbit. So if people really have a lot to say, or they have a lot of value that they can provide, I feel like the podcast would make a lot of sense if they're trying to get the word out.
Yeah, definitely. I know for me, if it's a YouTube video that I really, really want to listen to, I even say listen. I don't watch them. So I'll just listen to it instead of watching it. But that's me. I prefer to learn, and my favorite kind of content is audio versus anything else.
Right. Unless it comes to SNL sketches, and then you got to have the video.
And then you got to watch visual. It for
sure. That's a big part of it. Awesome. Well, let's say somebody is thinking about, diving into podcast guesting, they've never done it before, where would be a good place to start?
So there are a lot of ways that you can learn about it. I guess if you aren't currently a podcast listener, I would start listening to podcasts, especially in your niche. You could think about who are other people in your space that do something similar to you. Do they have podcasts? Listening to those. And then I would also start thinking about who your target audience is and start listening to those podcasts. So that would be number one if you're not currently a podcast listener. We've had discovery calls with people that are not podcast listeners. And I got maybe 10 minutes into the call and with the questions that they were asking, and I realized that they thought a webinar, like if you sign up for a free webinar, say to learn about cash flow management, that's a podcast. I'm like, no, a webinar is not a podcast. But assuming that you're familiar with the platform, and you want to explore guesting, there are a number of things that you can do. So first step is I would probably look into some of the matchmaking groups that exist online, because it's a very low barrier to entry way to dip your toe in the water and get started. So it allows you to create a profile for yourself, put up a headshot, what's your expertise, a link to your website and your social channels, and some of the things that you might want to talk about. Conversely, hosts sign up for that, and then they will browse and invite guests that they think would be a good fit. A really good one is matchmaker.fm. I send people to that one quite a bit.
Okay.
So
I've never even heard of that. So that's good.
I don't recommend it for people that want to go all in, but if you're just wanting to get started and like learn about it, it's a good place because a lot of the hosts have newer shows. So they're either in pre-launch or they're brand spanking new. So they're still kind of trying to figure out what they're doing as a podcast host. So that's where I mean it's kind of a lower stakes. You're not going on a more established show, which can sometimes provoke a lot of nerves for people. They don't know what to expect. Your reach when you're a podcast guest can be quite large. And so that's why I suggest it's a good place to get started.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Once you've done that, like getting a little bit more serious about what are going to be the best things for you to talk about on a podcast interview. And a few ideas for how to brainstorm good topics for yourself is what are the questions that you hear most frequently from your clients or potential clients about problems in their business? Another one would be if you have a oppositional viewpoint to the rest of your industry on the way to approach things. So like, for instance, one of our clients, she has a very strong opinion on celebrity entrepreneurship and the promise of the easy pill to a 6-figure business.
Yes.
So, she stands out because she is approaching things and she's saying things that but in general, people aren't saying. So those are always really good, juicy topics that hosts like because it's not what everybody else is talking about. So those are just a couple ideas on ways to get started with your interview topics.
Yeah, I think now kind of being on the other side of the mic, if you will, that would be something that I'd be looking for guests too, is somebody who has a point of view. Or just something that they have an expertise on, or something that is going to be, if you're talking to somebody for an hour, you need to have some things to talk about. So if you're a guest coming and like putting yourself forward as saying like, hey, I want to be on your show, like be interesting. I think like have something interesting to offer so that you're more likely to get selected. Because I would imagine, and this hasn't happened to me yet because my podcast is just getting off the ground, but I imagine that people get bombarded with pitches on people wanting to be on their shows.
Yes, they do. They do. So yes, you need a way to stand out. So thinking about how can you provide value to the host audience? What are you going to say that's juicy and engaging? How are you going to help? How are you going to teach? Just approaching the whole process with the audience in mind, rather than, okay, this is my chance to be in the spotlight and I get to talk all about myself. That would be the big no-no is come from a position of serving rather than being self-serving.
So most of the people that are listening to this podcast will probably be service providers. So tap into that, people, listeners. Tap into what is that thing? Why do you serve? And what is your service? And how can you help? And I think sometimes people do worry about maybe giving away too much. If they have like a secret sauce or they have some kind of like special thing that they do with people. Do you have any thoughts on that? Maybe like
I do. I'm in the camp of give it all away.
Yeah.
I think that the more generous you can be with information, it just shows people that you're the real deal, The other thing too, and you've probably found this as well, Hannah, because I know you do a lot of really valuable content on your YouTube channel, is that people, when they're consuming information and they're not in the mindset of like, okay, I'm going to fix this problem now, they're kind of casually consuming it. Maybe they'll watch and they'll hear you say something like, oh, yeah, that's really important. I need to make a note and come back to that. Or if I hear something on a podcast, I'll think like, oh, yeah, I need to start doing that. But I'm just not in the mode of that I need to take action on that. But it just raises the credibility of the person who I'm hearing or watching, I think, that much more. So I know there's times when I've done trainings where I've just walked through exactly how my team pitches our clients for podcasts, like from A to Z. This is what we do, this is how we do it. Like, here it is. Here is what people pay us for. But then we still get hired because
Yeah.
of the time factor. You know, we all have a value of our time. And because the process is fairly time consuming, you have to research the right shows, which is the, most laborious part of it. I have to figure out what you're going to say in your pitch. You have to follow up on the pitch. So there are all these steps that if you're doing it yourself, it takes a lot of time and people are willing to pay for that. So
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of just share as much as you can, because that's where people are going to get the value and it will circle back to you at some point.
Yeah. And that sometimes by even going through like everything that you did, it might just bring the awareness of, wow, that is not something I want to take on internally. I don't have the resources to do that. And it totally makes sense to outsource it to, I have a lot of these conversations with clients about like trying to stay within our core competencies or
Mhm.
what we do really well and try to do that thing really well and outsource the stuff that is not part of your core competencies. So, full disclosure, everybody, I've hired Julie's company to get me on podcasts. And we did it last spring, I think it was. And it was something that I was like, it makes total sense for me to outsource this and for me to leverage somebody that does this every day. They
Mhm.
know the podcasts that are out there. It would take me a lot more time to research it than it will take your team time to research it. I didn't really have anybody on my team that was really passionate to do it for me. And it would be creating a lot of extra work for my administrative team and things like that. So for me, it was like a really clear value add of like, nope, I just want to be able to show up and get the expert advice on which shows I should be pitching and everything like that. And it was a really good decision for us.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree with that wholeheartedly. I mean, the same goes for financial, growth and projections and managing the financial side of the business. Like, from a very basic standpoint, sure, I could do my own bookkeeping, but that is not how I want to spend my time. So I outsource that. And same thing goes as your business grows and you need more of a financial coach and expert to help you make the right decisions on where you should be investing, where should you be spending money. Like, hire that out because it's going to make such a difference in your business versus trying to figure that all out yourself. Or worse yet, just like not even looking at it.
Which does happen sometimes.
Yeah.
um, well, what do you think about so somebody's doing podcasts and they are starting to guest. Um, how can they kind of use it to make sure that they have some return on investment of their
Mhm.
time? And do you have any tips for just kind of making sure that those conversations are actually fruitful?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So, one of the things that I always suggest is tracking.
Mhm.
So, we have a client portal that we do for folks that has the shows, the date of the interview, once the episode goes live, the interview link. And then you can take it a step further where many of our clients will have some sort of free gift, free offer, something that's useful to the listeners where they can enter their email address and then exchange they get the resource. Like, we have a best guest ever checklist for podcast guests, and it tells you what to do before, during, and after the interview. So you can create a custom link for each podcast episode that you're interviewed on. And then you can track to see, well, how many downloads did I get of
Mm.
that free thing? Another thing that we like to suggest is having a way to connect with you online. I know for me as a service provider, I love LinkedIn as my social media platform of choice, and most of our clients do too. And that is a great call to action at the end of the interview, because if somebody connects with you on LinkedIn, then they're going to start seeing your posts on LinkedIn, and they're much more likely to engage in a conversation with you somewhere down the road. So definitely have connect with me on LinkedIn, or if your social platform is something else, having a free resource. And then we also suggest, like, hey, if you're at a point where you want to start guesting on podcasts, book a discovery call with me on our website and list your website. So having those three kind of low stakes, connecting on social media, medium stakes, email address and the free gift, and then finally the booking a discovery call, making sure that you have a plan of what you're going to say at the end of the interview. That's a big one, because if you have this great conversation and then you never mention how people can follow you or get in touch with you, then you're not fully maximizing the interview.
Yeah.
So
missed opportunity there for sure.
Yeah, that's a big one. And then tracking and paying attention and measuring to see what's working. Are there certain genres of shows that are really working for you? Are there certain topics that are really resonating with hosts? So just reviewing that information on either a monthly or quarterly basis is really important.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I'm thinking about all the times I didn't do that. Whoops. Yes, I have those things when, I have ways, free downloads and whatnot. I just sometimes don't always mention them. So that's a really good reminder there.
It's a good reminder. Yeah. We always tell our clients to write it down on a sticky note and put it on your monitor so you have it during the interview so you don't forget to mention it.
Absolutely. Like I have the record reminder.
Yeah.
Like press record. It's like also remember the things that you want to do. When I was in Scotland last year, I drove a car, and they drive on the left side of the road over there. So I had a big sticky note on my dashboard that said keep left.
Smart. Oh, that's really smart.
And it worked. I'm here. So okay, well, Julie, I know that we've talked about this and you've said yes to agreeing to talk a little bit about your own business, because you started this business in 2020. And from what I can tell, you're very successful in bringing on new clients, and you're keeping yourself busy, and you're growing, which is amazing. And we have other people who are growing their own service businesses listening. So I would love to know, because from an outsider's perspective, I saw you like do this business, and then it was immediately you had a team and you were just running. It didn't seem to me like you had this big ramp up period of just, solo Julie doing this thing for years and years and years, and then maybe hiring somebody and starting to duplicate yourself. Like I see a lot of service providers starting to grow their businesses that way. So could you tell us a little bit about like how you did it differently? Or what you did when you were starting this business?
Yeah. So when I started the business, it was just me for 2020. And then I grew faster than I expected to. I think part of the benefit of running a networking organization beforehand is I had a big network.
Yes.
And when I launched this and let people know what I was doing, I had probably a bigger response than somebody that didn't have a large network. So I hired my first team member to start in January of 2021, and she was an executive assistant, Jen. And so it was just she and I for a while, because I was finding there was a lot of administrative work, which is not my strong suit. Of like, for instance, for our clients, we do a prep document before the interview. And so I was able to delegate all of that guest prep and host prep off to her, which freed up a lot more of my time. And then I started thinking about, okay, how am I going to grow this business? I need more people doing the outreach and the, pitching our clients. So I started connecting with people that I noticed that it had a similar business to mine to find out like, where do you find people? Because it's a very unique skill set. Um, I found a couple of great groups to post jobs. And that was where I found my first hire, who's Janice, who's still with us. And then I enrolled in some programs for companies that were service providers that were scaling.
Mm.
And I'm really glad that I did that because I think that really helped me define and refine and streamline my hiring process. I
Mm.
still use the same process that I learned from the program that I was in, and it's been really successful. It's a lot of work on the front end in terms of our applicants apply. It's a fairly long application. And then they have a second. So the people who make it through that round, then they have a secondary application. And then they have a video. They send me a video. So there's a lot of work on them to go through the process. And I think that's part of it. Once they make it through that, then, I'm like, okay, they're a hard worker.
Yeah.
So I've used that process to hire people after that. So I hired 2 people at a time, which I think is really great because then you have 2 people going through the process of kind of
Mm.
learning and onboarding at the same time. They have each other to bounce ideas and questions off of. So that's been the process of hiring. So I hired my first account manager in October of 2021, and then my next 2 in April of 2020. So that's been the hiring journey. And now I'm hiring 2 more people that will hopefully start in September.
Yeah, that's great. Now, when you first started this business, did you need startup capital or a loan or anything to get going?
I really didn't. I did my website myself because I knew from having my business and also watching hundreds of women start businesses like you start and then you pivot and then you realize like, oh no, I don't want to serve that client. I want to serve this client. So I was like, I'm not going to spend $10,000 right out of the gate to build a
Mm.
website and then need to update it a year or 2 down the road.
Mhm.
So no, I really didn't. I just used my own funds and was very fortunate to start getting clients fairly quickly.
Yeah, that's great. And then you actually have that cash coming in.
And
Um,
since it was just me, when you're not having to pay anybody else,
right.
your expenses are a lot lower.
Yes, for sure. That's great. Are you, I always try to tell people that too when they're first getting started. Sometimes people think they want to go and like spend money on a big branding package and get the
Mhm.
name just right and get the logo just right. And it's like, you don't even know who you're serving yet. So, how do you
Yeah.
know how you want the brand to stand out if you
Yeah.
don't even know who you're talking and don't build a website when you don't even know who you're talking to? It's
Yeah,
like,
yeah. No, I
it,
was all about like getting clients and making sure I had consistent revenue. I think
yeah.
the other benefit of being this type of service provider is we do have 6-month minimum agreements with our clients. And
Mhm.
so when you have that predictability of income for at least 6 months at a time, it helps versus if you're doing more project-based work and you
Yes.
could have 1 month that's a $10,000 month and another month that's a $3,000 month, like that just creates a lot more inconsistencies and I think puts more stress on the business owner because you never know what's going to happen next.
Yeah, and you also charge like a flat rate for over
Hmm.
that 6 months too, so that gives that consistent cash flow. We love a good retainer revenue model here.
Yes.
It is
And
it
I
makes
learned I should
planning so much easier. Yes.
Yeah, I should mention, like, when I first started, it was only 3 months, and
Mhm.
I found that, like, it still felt like we were just getting started, and it
Right.
wasn't a long enough time period, and then I bumped it to 4 months, and then I bumped it to 6 months, and most of our clients do work with us for longer than 6 months, but it's, that's a good time frame to work with.
Yeah, I mean, I can see with something I mean, what I see practically in the timeline of podcasts is you can say, "Okay, I'm gonna go pitch podcasts," but then you might not get onto somebody's schedule even if they say yes for a month or 2 months,
Yeah.
and then, depending on how big the podcast is and how big of a backlog those, podcasts have, you could record in 2 months, but then it might not even get published for another 2 months. So you have this really long potential timeline. And I was a guest on a couple where it was like, well, this is going out Friday because we have nothing else in the we have nothing else in the tank. So, your episode's going next. So it's something to think about too, that if you do think about that podcasting strategy for marketing, to think about the longer timeline that you could be potentially looking at. So I think it's brilliant that you have a 6-month minimum, because even from somebody who's received that service, it makes sense too, because the actual deliverable is timed out a long ways. Well, what would you say is like one of the biggest financial challenges you've had as you've been growing this business?
I think that obviously my biggest expense is team now, and support resources for the two. So we have a software that we pay for that enables us to do the research better, faster. And, as the team grows, that becomes more expensive because you're paying for more seats. So compensating my team well is really, really important to me. I want to retain my team because they're amazing. And I would say that that's probably the biggest challenge, is just as the business grows, then that expense grows and maintaining profitability becomes more challenging. I've had to, we did profit first in terms of our, I don't know what you call that, just like our cash management or profitability. And so, I started off like 50% of, what our revenue was, that just went to me. And as we've grown, I've had to dial that back a little bit just because the expenses have come up. So, I would say that that's the biggest challenge. And then taxes.
Of course. Planning for those taxes.
I'm finally switching to an S corp, which it sounds like will save us taxes, but just, being an LLC, that was a big, even though I socked away 15%, it still wasn't enough.
Yeah. Yeah, we typically would say 20 to 25% if somebody doesn't have a CPA really doing those regular estimates for them. And then reminder to everybody, if you're looking to save on taxes, talk to a CPA that will actually do kind of like a quick calculation if you should be an S corp or not, because depending on your state, depending on how much revenue you have, sometimes it's not going to be a tax saver, but there's a big kind of misinformation that's been spread that it always will save you taxes, and that's not true.
Okay. Who's been coming up in my feed a lot lately is, what is the company called? It's not Bench, but there's a company on social media that is really pushing S corp.
I feel like they're called The Collective.
Collective. That's what it is.
That's it. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I've noticed that too. I've seen that as well. And I'm like, just make sure because we've had clients that have had multiple hundreds of $1,000s in profit, and still, because of the state rules, sometimes the CPA actually doesn't recommend going to S corp. So
that's really interesting. I didn't realize that it depends on your state. I mean, I guess it would, depending on if you pay income tax or not in your state, but good to know.
Always a good reminder, CPA. People. I like to make sure there's very few blanket tax rules that we can apply to everybody.
Yeah.
So, but it's a good, I think, and also paying yourself when you're an S corp, you pay yourself a regular paycheck, which is nice, just from a personal planning. What payroll is going to be, and then you can kind of decide, okay, if we have extra profit, we can do distributions, and you can have a little bit more flexibility on that.
Yeah.
So, thank you for sharing that. If you are to look at one financial metric, what is it? What's your favorite one?
Oh, my favorite one. I love the profit and loss comparison to prior year or prior period. I'm a big, I don't know if goal setting is the right term, but I love tracking and comparing. So kind of seeing, we had a lot of expenses last year. And so I tried to be a lot smarter about our expenditures this year. And so it was very rewarding to me to see like the amount of money that I spent on conferences that didn't have an ROI, that number is way down this year. And so that's probably my favorite report to look at.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. Yeah, I like to see. And then you can see revenue growth, expenses
Mm-hmm.
down,
Mm-hmm.
profit is up. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I love it. Well, thank you for sharing all of that. Before we go, I want to make sure people know how to find you. So your website is yourexpertguest.com.
Correct.
And is
Correct.
there anywhere else that you like to have people connect with you?
Yeah. Well, I would love to connect on LinkedIn. So I am Julie Fry. And Fry like the front, like the food, not the boot. So connect with me there. And then we also have a checklist that if you are interested in podcast guesting, it gives you everything you need to know before, during, and after the interview to really maximize the potential of that interview. So you can get that at yourexpertguest.com/checklist.
Awesome. Definitely check that out. Last question for you is
Yes.
what are your favorite podcasts? And since you listen to so many, I'm going to give you one fun podcast and then maybe a business podcast.
Okay. Okay. So I'm going to have to look at I've been doing an experiment because I've been reading this book called The Comfort Crisis. I highly recommend. It's by Michael Easter.
I'm absolutely like, that is like totally hitting some of the conversations I've been having personally. So I don't know about it, but like that name is something I need to listen to for
You
sure.
would love this book. You would love this book. So anyway, one of the things that they talk about is the benefits of being in nature. We're really lucky where we live.
Mm-hmm.
There's lots of wooded trails. And so I have committed to now when I go on walks to not bring my phone.
Nice.
Which is usually when I listen to podcasts. So my podcast listening is going way down until I can figure out like, okay, am I now listening to podcasts instead of watching a TV show at night or something? So, but my favorite current fun podcast, and it just ended the season, is called Scamanda.
I've heard
it's
of that.
kind of a true crimey podcast about this young woman who defrauded hundreds of people out of money by faking that she had cancer. And it is just jaw-dropping, shocking. You're listening to this like, I can't believe this woman. So that was really fun, Scamanda. And then I also love Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend. So that's my jam. Business, gosh, I love Sales Maven with Nikki Rausch.
We had Nikki Rausch on the podcast.
I love, let's see here. Ooh, I love the Marketing Artificial Intelligence show.
Oh,
it are these two guys that are really kind of staying cutting edge on everything that's happening with AI. And every episode, they really kind of go deep on three of the most relevant AI stories of the last week. And then they'll kind of do a rapid fire session at the end. So I feel like even though I don't work in the AI space, it's impacting all of us, right?
Yes.
So it's helping me kind of stay up to speed on current events. So I love that one. I love Stacking Your Team with Shelley Warren about scaling a team and growing your business. I could go on and on and on. Oh, one more for service providers, the BS-free service business with Maggie Patterson.
Okay.
That is a really good one. And she's been a service provider, content marketing agency for 15 years. And so she's kind of seen it all. And she just provides, she's like you, she provides real, actionable, helpful advice.
Awesome. Yeah. I love that. Thank you for sharing, because I knew you had some good ones.
Yeah.
I knew you would. Awesome. Well, Julie, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate all of your wisdom on podcasting and also your openness to talking about your own business. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks so much for having me. It's great.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Financial Clarity Podcast. Be sure to check out the show notes to learn more about today's episode and click subscribe on your favorite podcast app.